Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video.
It was a week before Thor's coronation, when Natasha's project reached the point where they could finally activate it. Harry had called a press conference the day before, and in the early morning hours of next day, Natasha activated the control rod, which would vanish all the drugs they had replaced with magically conjured replacements since the start of the project. They had infiltrated drug smuggling rings and production locations. Every time a shipment was ready for distribution, it would be replaced with a conjured product of equal or greater quality. The effect being that people got much better quality and less deaths occurred due to bad products. However, where drugs were mixed with other substances so that they could sell more of an inferior product, there was little they could do about it. They obviously couldn't stop all drugs from entering or exiting a country, but they focused mostly on the worst kinds of drugs they could find. Domestically produced drugs were brought to the attention of the DEA and other countries' equivalents. They didn't just focus on only America after all. Cannabis was skipped entirely as some people used it medicinally, and it was just too widely spread to try and track all the sources. Harry personally didn't really care about a substance that was not physically addictive and chilled people out. When the press were ready, Harry stepped forward. Before he could speak a single word, there was an impact in the air, a yard in front of Harry. He didn't even blink as Tony in his Iron Man suit shot into the air and to the building where the shot had come from. "Don't worry," he said to the frightened members of the press. "We were prepared for that, and all of you are protected by a barrier we set up to protect the press." He put a finger to his ear and nodded. "The shooter has been detained and taken into custody," he told them. "I can tell you are afraid, but don't worry, we have the situation completely under control." Iron Man was seen dropping a man with EPI personnel before he landed behind Harry again. They had no doubt there were more assassins in the works, but hopefully their display of power would stop any further attempts from occurring during this press conference. The flying forts were the perfect cover, especially when invisible. He gave them a couple of moments to get themselves back together before continuing. "The reason for this press conference and the attack are most likely related. For a long time now, EPI has been working to better this world, and we have so far succeeded wonderfully, even if I do say so myself, but we need a little history lesson before we continue. As you may know, back in 2014, EPI was founded to help protect the planet from domestic and extraterrestrial threats. As a major investor, I have been working hand in hand with them to help them achieve their goals. I have little say in their comings and goings, as I left the running of the company to those far more experienced and knowledgeable than myself. I did have some input in some of their goals, and helped start one of the divisions that would focus on a major global issue, drugs." There was an excited murmuring in the crowd as most of the press had already been made aware of the mysterious disappearance of large stocks of drugs from various locations, some even from police lockup. That had caused problems all over the world, which was why they activated the project only a few hours before the press conference. Fury had already known that this would happen and had, right at the beginning, made certain that drugs were tested and recorded properly, and the drugs themselves not be the only evidence in cases where people were arrested. Photographic evidence was now a requirement along with documented tests, which were mandatory for the drugs anyway. He didn't want dealers back on the street because the only evidence vanished. EPI's reach went far and procedure had been updated worldwide, where necessary, and EPI had even helped by providing acceptable testing equipment for places where lab environments were not available as readily. If people did their jobs, there should be no fallout after the drugs in question disappeared. "This morning," Harry continued after the murmurs had abated, "we activated the final step of the program, which I'm afraid I can't give you much details about as it is, once again, proprietary technology." There were more murmurs, but the worldwide press knew by now that Harry Potter didn't take questions. He made statements. Just under 3 hours ago, a large percentage of drugs worldwide disappeared from wherever they were. That includes drugs that had been imbibed since the project started. Now, I know you are curious how that's even possible, but I'm afraid I have to say again, proprietary technology. What I can tell you is that some people who had been slaves to drugs will have woken up this morning without any cravings at all. The very opioids and substances that leave lasting mental effects due to saturation into their very cells have a new lease on life since they don't need to go through withdrawal. I know this does not negate the emotional dependence, nor does it reverse the scarring effects of some of the substances, but it does give those people who had been made victims of their individual circumstance a chance to recover what is left of their lives and continue to a brighter future. That's not the end of what I'm here to say, though. Harry said as he held up a hand when people started yelling questions. From today on, the distribution centers and homeless shelters hosted by EPI will have counselors and recovery clinics available for people who wish to use this opportunity, but do not know how to do so. There will be group sessions and support groups ready for anyone who wishes to better their lives. If you are not fortunate enough to have been affected by the actions we have taken, since the technology used is new and not every corner of the world could be completely ridden of every trace of these substances, there is also a new treatment available for those who wish to flush the substances from themselves in a painless and cost-effective way. All you need to do is present yourself to one of the clinics or homeless shelters I mentioned and join one of the sessions hosted for recovering addicts. You will not need to identify yourself or request treatment, as the technology will be activated and used during every session to ensure everybody there is lucid and capable of coherent thought. We are not offering you a way to have a fun time and get rid of the evidence either, as blood and urine tests will still reveal residue that can be identified. We will not require your names or identities, but this technology can identify when it has been repeatedly used to clear your system of narcotics and intoxicants. For a complete list of drugs that may have been affected, please go to our website, as there will be a full list that you can peruse. This technology is very precise and cannot have affected drugs acquired legally. So there is no need for alarm for those of you using substances with a writ or permit from your doctor, as long as it was legally acquired. I know there are many questions, Harry said, holding up his hands when the majority of those gathered tried screaming questions at him, but please contact EPI's newly created Public Relations Department. You can find contact information for them on the website. Harry then turned around and walked back into the Stark Industries building, ignoring the many questions. Jarvis would be a busy man for the next couple of weeks as he ran the Public Relations Department through his digital connection. He had been informed of every step of the project, knew the precautions taken, and had even helped them plan for every contingency. When the calls started rolling in, he'd be splitting his attention to the hundreds of lines at once, each instance of him using a different voice and speech pattern. Having a quantum supercomputer for a brain would leave this as a simple task that he could literally do in his sleep. Jarvis had volunteered for the job when they were planning on hiring the required staff and training them with all the correct information. The biggest problem they predicted was people objecting to substances being taken directly out of their bodies without permission. The simple solution to that would be telling people that the substances themselves were targeted before it was ingested/injected/inhaled. They weren't reaching into people's bodies as much as affecting the already targeted substances. When people asked how, they referred to the original statement of proprietary technology. If anyone wanted to complain, they'd have to admit to being dealers or users, both of which were illegal to begin with. That didn't stop politicians and governments from trying to court-order more information. At that point, Jarvis gladly told people to deliver the documents to their main office. The fact that nobody knew where that was led police to try and raid the technology from the distribution centers, but since the people there were under contract, and the potions in use were in magically hidden locations, the only thing the police could do was take the potion-laced tea and coffee off-site to be tested. Undrunk potion would simply be vanished by wards around the centers, so that left everybody with the mystery of how the technology worked, since informants told them they felt the effect when they drank the beverages. Some of Harry's claims, like the ability to test for the substances later, were complete fabrications. The fact was that Friday's camera systems were installed at all the distribution centers, and repeat offenders could be identified first by it, and also by the They could then be taken aside and offered more clinical help. Harry had wanted to just let them get the treatment anyway, but he had been told that that would not solve the problem that they were working to fight in the first place. In the end, he let Natasha and her team dictate how these things were handled. It was her baby after all. The response in the press was varied. People's rights versus those same people affecting society negatively. The overall response and the grateful feedback from people who had struggled with physical addiction for years was overwhelming. Not having to go through the pain of withdrawal led rehabilitation centers to send their clients to at least one session at the EPI clinics. That did not solve the mental side of addiction though, but that was why they had hired and trained so many people to deal with these situations. There were more downsides and upsides. But Harry stopped paying attention when Fury kept on laughing at the demands for answers from infuriated government officials. For those governments who supported EPI, an offer was made to join the fold, and they were contracted in and brought up to speed. That was when the Council of Earth was formed. Unlike the UN, they concentrated solely on bettering the entire world for everyone, and bickering among governments was not tolerated. This was not a platform to bring up grievances between countries. The World Security Council had had enough experience with these people, and enough influence that they actually became useful for once, and Fury allowed them to represent EPI's interests in those meetings, with supervision of course. Hill was not impressed that she was the council's babysitter, but at least she held the reins and not the other way around. A week passed and the day of Thor's coronation arrived and he was nowhere to be found. So of course Harry was contacted first thing. He was not a happy camper as he'd gone to sleep only 2 hours prior, having been working on his spell storage buttons again. He felt he was getting close, but it was not quite there yet. The enchantment factories were his greatest feat of magic, being capable of producing magical effects, enchant items which were sometimes conjured, and making said items without him needing to be nearby to help the process. This was a big step towards making Hermione's dream come true, and he was very excited to be able to be the one to achieve it, since he had almost thought Tony would get there before him, with how much time Hermione spent with him. He was still summoning her every other week for a tech meeting with Tony, where they brainstormed ideas and applications. He arrived on Asgard in the briefing room from which Odin had called him, only to be engulfed in a massive hug. "My son, it is good to see you," Odin greeted. To be fair, it had been a while since Harry had gone to Asgard. Something was telling him that he needed to get as much done as he could and as soon as possible. He didn't know what was giving him this feeling, but he wouldn't ignore his instincts. "Hello, father," Harry said, resigning his emotion of annoyance in favor of a wry smile. "What has Thor done this time?" Odin let Harry go and a look of exasperation crossed his face. "Your brother wouldn't tell anyone where he was going and he's not answering his mirror." Odin looked at Harry in mock annoyance. "You never should have given us those blasted things. Your mother has been getting quite attached to them and now she expects anyone she calls to always be available to her." "I had noticed," Harry admitted. "It's not uncommon on Midgard for women and mothers especially to become quite attached to these easy forms of connectivity. Just be glad you don't have access to social media." "I'll take your word for it," Odin intoned. "Now about Thor," he asked hopefully. Harry nodded and put his hand on his Avengers bracelet. As he focused on the magic that would allow him to appear at Thor's side, he smirked when he got an image of Thor sitting in a cell talking to a skeleton. He soon vanished, appearing next to the cell. "Who's your friend?" he whispered. Thor nearly jumped out of his skin at the unexpected voice. "Damn it, Harry," he whispered urgently at his floating brother. "Why are you here?" he asked. "I should be asking you that," Harry said with a pointed look. "Frigga tried calling but you aren't answering. I told them I'm doing something and will be back in time." Thor defended himself. "Also, it's a little difficult to answer," he said, indicating his bound form. "You don't seem to be faring well in your quest then," Harry said. "Can I help?" "I have everything under control," Thor said, "even though I know it doesn't look like it." "Okay." Harry shrugged as he waved his hand at Thor a couple of times. "I've just added a couple of protections for Mother's peace of mind." "Thank you, now please leave," Thor whispered urgently at Harry. "I'm expecting company soon." As Thor finished saying this, his cage opened up and he fell. Harry just shrugged and returned to Asgard and awaiting Odin. "Well?" Odin asked. Harry smirked and sent a spell at the wall to connect to the monitoring spells he had cast on Thor. They would only last a short while, an hour tops, but he suspected he'd not need much more than that. Then he conjured some comfortable chairs like you'd find at a movie theater and some popcorn. "Please take a seat and see for yourself. This is what Thor is doing right now." Odin took the proffered seat and watched as Thor had a discussion with Surtur, who he had thought was dead. Then there was the inevitable fight, followed by Thor smirking at a fire elemental dragon after bashing Surtur's skull from his body and collecting the skull and disappearing by portkey. All in all, it was a fun little show. They watched as Thor walked directly to the briefing room and Harry continued sitting there until Thor walked in on them and saw them monitoring him. "You spoiled my surprise," he accused Harry. "You worried mother and father." Harry shot back as he cancelled the magic on the wall and got up. "What's worse is that you have been acting on prophetic information and you didn't tell me about it." A look of concern crossed Thor's features, but before he could reply, Odin spoke up. "I can see your worry, my son, and Harry has his reasons for fearing prophecy, but why did you pick today of all days to go after Surtur and why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked. Thor took a breath and then slumped. "It was because of Harry's beliefs in the immutability of prophecy that I did not tell him. I wanted to stop Ragnarok before it could start. With Surtur gone there can be no Ragnarok, it is averted." Odin looked a little older at this statement. "I'm afraid Ragnarok cannot be stopped. I once feared Hela would be the cause, but Harry has truly come through for us there." he said with a smile at his youngest, while Hela remains on New Atlantis. There can be no doubt that she will not cause trouble for us, and Heimdall informs me that she has grown quite attached to the island. But then how? Thor started. It's always some stupid, unexpected thing. Harry cut in. In my case, it was a rat that lived right under my nose for years. If Pettigrew didn't return to Voldemort, he'd have remained a wraith until I could destroy the Horcruxes. Then he looked at the skull/crown on Thor's back. Speaking of which, you are aware that Surtur's soul still resides in that thing, right? Thor quickly took the crown off his back and placed it on the table. Can it be destroyed? Thor asked. Maybe, Harry said. I'd have to try using the sword of Gryffindor or basilisk venom. I don't think it would be wise to try and use fiendfire. This might just be the one case in which it would have the opposite effect. I'd have to agree with you about that. Odin said, from all you've told me about fiendfire, it would be wise to avoid that. Then we go to Nidavellir and get the sword right now. Thor enthused. No. A voice said from the door. Frigga stood there tapping her foot on the floor. Your coronation is today, and I am in no mood with any of you right now to allow you to take on quests. I'm sorry. Harry and Odin said instantly. They should have told her the status of Thor the moment they knew. In the excitement of the moment, they had forgotten. You should be, Frigga said with a stern look before rushing in and hugging her eldest son. I'm just glad you are safe, she said. Now, we'll have someone deposit that disgusting thing in the vault and we'll start getting you ready, she said, taking Thor by the hand and leaving the room with him. Harry sighed and picked up the skull. It was quite heavy, but his Asgardian blessings allowed him to handle it with relative ease. Shall we? He asked Odin as he opened a portal to the vault. Odin nodded and led them through the portal and to an unoccupied pedestal. Place it here, he said. When Harry had deposited the crown on the pedestal, Odin looked at him with honest concern. I suspect we are closer to Ragnarok than I originally thought. In the prophecy, I die and Asgard is destroyed. No, Harry said stubbornly. If that is the case, I'll find a way to subvert the prophecy. I've done my research and discovered a couple of loopholes which may allow me to bypass your death. Do not fear death, Harry, Odin started. You don't understand. Harry interrupted dangerously. I won't allow it. Don't tell me it cannot be done. Just tell me when you suspect this is going to happen. Odin looked angry for a moment before he relented. It could be as soon as today. When Thor went to Surtur and brought the crown here, he set in motion a series of events that will likely lead to the prophecy being fulfilled. So we do not have a lot of time, Harry asked. Our time is very limited. Odin agreed. As early as today to a couple of months at most. Okay, I need to go then, Harry said. When Odin made to object, Harry turned a determined smile on him. I'll be at the coronation. Don't go making up your will or anything. Then he disappeared. It was a couple of hours later that Harry returned with Natasha, dressed to impress. Odin could tell Harry had been hard at work. His magic seemed forced, like he had used a lot of it, and then recharged himself from the ring one too many times, and Natasha had a certain readiness he had not seen in her posture before. Odin also sensed that Harry had company. Many invisible people silently spreading out and dispersing into the crowd. Some of them took to the sky, and Odin could tell some sort of magic was being applied as they flew to different locations across Asgard. Harry, Odin asked as they approached, should I be concerned that you are breaking Asgardian law? If Asgard is in danger, I'll break every law to save my people. I made an oath to protect them when you adopted me, Harry said matter-of-factly. Is it safe to assume that the coronation will be taking place in the Citadel and that all your subjects will be there? We moved the coronation to the plaza since we have so many people attending. Also, if there's an attack, it will be aimed at the Citadel first. All but a few guards and Heimdall will be there. Odin said. He simply accepted Harry's word that what he was sensing was necessary. He also noted that Harry had an active mirror in his pocket. He could sense the connection. You're having your people enact some sort of emergency plan. Harry nodded, but Natasha spoke for him as she removed her hand from her ear, having received feedback through it. If anything happens, tell your people to stay in the plaza. They will be safe there. If you can sense what's going on, you know that Harry has spent a lot of power to try and have a backup plan ready for Asgard and her people. That's if the prophecy actually refers to today. Harry said he was not taking any chances. If Asgard was to be destroyed, he'd save everyone on it. Odin nodded somberly and led them to the head of the plaza, where a raised dais awaited him and from which he would speak. They were seated, while a couple of courtiers made their announcements and people were organized in their correct locations. 30 minutes later, Thor's moment arrived and he walked through the people with a bit of a forced smile on his face. Loki was standing next to Harry and he whispered to him, if I wanted to use the distraction of the coronation to strike, this would be the moment. Harry nodded and suddenly an idea struck him and he paled visibly. Damn it, we should have hidden the vault under Fidelius. he whispered furiously. Loki nodded along. They really should have thought of that. Are your people stationed near the vault? Harry shook his head. They have other orders, he said. Odin made a speech about the importance of duty and wisdom, to know when to act and when to wait, when to rely on others, and that doing so was not to be considered weakness. He finished the speech by stating that Asgard is not a place but a people. Harry suspected he had thrown that in there for what would likely occur in the next couple of days, weeks, or months. He really hoped Asgard would not fall, that there was a mistake in the prophecy somewhere. Asgard had become like a home to him. When Thor swore the oaths humbly, but with conviction, Odin finished with, I, Odin Borson Allfather, proclaim you Thor Odinson, King of Asgard. Loki was looking around with apprehension but finally breathed a sigh of relief. Those gathered had no such problems, breaking into thunderous applause. It seems that whatever was happening wouldn't be hitting them as immediately as was feared. The party that happened after the coronation was one of the largest Harry had ever attended. Natasha kept on whispering to him about the status of the various objectives as she kept in touch with Fury and their people. While they sat at the table and people were being merry, with Thor in the prime position on the throne, Harry was conjuring rings, adding a basic resizing charm and a portkey to a special location. Then Natasha used the handheld laser engraver to add the runes that would ensure the longevity of the conjuration during the entire feast. Harry and Natasha just kept on producing. Even when people asked, he'd force a smile and say that it was a surprise for later. They even had a couple of conversations with friends, but they couldn't be broken from their work. Natasha was keeping count until she reached a certain number. Harry was running low again and about to fill up his stores through the ring when Natasha placed a hand on his arm. That's enough, she said. Harry looked up at her and sagged. Finally, he said. I need a break. I'm getting tired of charging myself up. Natasha nodded. You used a lot of power today. I'm not surprised you're tired. And what exactly have you been up to today? Odin asked as he approached them. He had been worried about the coronation as well. It was, as Loki suggested, the best time to attack. He was expecting something at any moment as well. We were making arrangements, Harry said, indicating the rings and handing one to Odin. Odin inspected it and immediately recognized one of the enchantments. This has one of your transportation magics on it, he said. I don't know the other magic I see, but it looks like it should affect the structure of the ring somehow. Comfort charm, Harry confirmed. The ring will shrink or grow to fit the person who tries to put it on. From the amount you have made, I'm guessing you made one for every soul on Asgard, Odin asked. Emergency portkeys, yes, Natasha said for him. Harry has prepared a safe location for if the worst happens. There are also some precautions I've taken for other things, including this, Harry said, taking a bracer from inside his pouch. Don't look at what the bracer does, it will only cause you to worry. Simply put it on and activate it when the time comes. You'll know when that is, he said as he handed the bracer to Odin. Odin, showing the trust that Harry has earned from him, immediately placed the bracer on his forearm where it affixed itself magically. How do I activate it? He asked. Simply, will it active? It will perform its functions, Harry assured him. Natasha's hand went to her ear and she listened to something. Then she broke out in a smile. They've finished placing the stones. You only need to activate them. Harry returned the smile before closing his eyes and focusing on the closest stone he could feel. It was not hard, since every single one of them shone like a beacon to him. So much of his power did they contain. He sent the tiniest tendril of power into the closest one and let it do its thing. The main reason for him being so haggard was that he spent a month restarting the day and creating hundreds of these enchanted stones. What they did was a secret for now, but with them in place, Harry would sleep well for the first time in a long time, from his perspective anyway, as the stone sent a small, insignificant wave of power outwards. With the sound of droplet falling into a pool of water, the other ward stones also activated with a similar sound, to his magical senses anyway. Odin suddenly looked up and around as if he could hear it too. Before every single stone spread throughout the realm, eternal disappeared, not leaving a trace of the magic they held. What was that? Odin asked. If I told you that I knew the future, and warned you of something that would hurt your people, would you change the future if you could? Harry asked rather than answer. Odin thought that over. He'd had that same thought thousands of times. Obviously he'd want to change something, but in doing so he'd invalidate what was told to him, so it wouldn't be told in the first place, causing a paradox. If he wasn't warned though, his future wasn't written yet and anything was possible. In this case, however, his future was written, but Harry had the look of having found a solution. Harry's own experience with prophecy saw him fulfilling it and winning, but lost in the end anyway, so in that case the prophecy was fulfilled and thwarted at the same time. You've found a way to both fulfill and bypass the prophecy, Odin guessed, but telling me what you did might affect what I do, so you can't tell me, Harry didn't confirm or deny anything as Natasha handed him a cup of some sort of mead. He tasted it and decided he liked it. "This isn't bad," he said in thanks. He glanced at Odin and saw that he had yet to look away. Harry sent him a forced smile. "I've been on the bad side of prophecies before, as you know. You'll just have to continue showing me trust." Finally, Odin nodded and pulled his tunic sleeve over the bracer as he looked over at Thor. "I guess that means Frigga and I will be staying here rather than taking that vacation we had planned," he said. "Where were you thinking of going?" Harry asked. He had his suspicions. "Where else?" Frigga spoke up. "We have a very nice little place by the sea where a friend of mine has told me that the nymphs' trees have started blooming, ready to bear their fruit." "What?" Harry asked intelligently. "Did you know?" Frigga asked with a smirk and a raised eyebrow. She had been hoping to change the subject, and it seemed that she had succeeded. "Zira and the other nymphs are connected. When you finally relented and allowed her into your heart, you forged a connection with most of the grove." Harry's face lost a little color. What about Zamantha? He really hoped she wasn't part of this. He was shocked about the revelation, of course, but he had known Frigga had planned something and he trusted her. He had also suspected something with how happy the nymphs had gotten after Zira joined his bed. "Fear not," Frigga said in a calming tone. "Zamantha sees you as a father and isn't old enough anyway. I would not allow her to connect to you in that way. She has another connection to you, which seemed to have been formed quite naturally. I think he makes a good father." Natasha agreed. She had noticed what Frigga was doing and approved. She had forced Harry's hand and accompanied him for every single trip back in time and ensured he ate and took time to sleep. She could tell that he was still overworking himself, though, and was worried about the low levels of magic she felt through the link on the ring. "I have no doubt that our children will be loved and cared for." Frigga gave her a knowing look and nodded slightly when Harry's head spun around to look at Natasha in question. "No, Harry, much to my own disappointment, she is not yet with child." She interjected for Natasha. "I may decide to cancel your protections against such things if you make me wait much longer, though." Harry sighed in relief when his own diagnostic magic came back with a negative result, making it quite positive from his perspective really. He had no objections with having kids with Natasha, but only when he knew he could keep them safe. Then he turned to Frigga with a calculating look. "Don't think that I'm going to forget about this whole thing with the nymph grove. You should have told me." Frigga's smile faded, but only slightly. "Would you have denied them something they sorely needed?" "Well, no," Harry said. "Then we won't need to discuss it further." Frigga said simply. "But what about the nymphs?" Harry asked. "What about them?" Frigga asked. "I think he's worried that they are all pregnant." Natasha explained for him. Harry just looked between the two of them looking for an answer. Frigga's statement sounded like he had, in fact, impregnated all of them, but Natasha's calm statement made it sound like they were not. "Oh, I see." Frigga nodded. Then she shook her head at Harry with a look of bemusement. "Do you not know how babies are made?" Odin decided to save Harry. "You simply allowed their natures to be sated through Zira. They will no longer need to be paired with a man for their trees to flourish and bloom. No pregnancies will come from such a thing, not outside of the bedroom anyway." "You mean I'm sleeping with all of them?" Harry asked incredulously, only to hear the sniggers from behind him somewhere. He turned around to see Loki bent over as he laughed as silently as he could. "You're just sleeping with Zira and me." Natasha answered for her. "Your mother explained it to me as them benefiting from it, but not necessarily living it. It's the afterglow," came Thor's voice as he approached them from where he had been talking with one of the nobles from Vanaheim. "It's much like relieving a pressure that keeps building otherwise." "How do you know this?" Natasha asked. "Most young men in Asgard study nymphs at some point," Frigga said in exasperation. "Their sexual nature is quite provocative to the young libido." "Mother!" Thor and Loki exclaimed as Harry just winced. Odin laughed at their discomfort. He had long since gotten used to such talk. Considering his wife's own nature, he was not unused to frank discussions of things that made others uncomfortable. He understood though, which is why he had never mentioned the difference Harry's book had made in the royal bedchamber. He was saving that for a special occasion, when he wanted to see all three his sons blush like children. The party lasted a full week, but Harry couldn't stay away from home that long. He ensured that everyone was given a ring and instruction on how they worked. They were also told to never take them off. Not for any reason, as when the time came they would all activate at once. King Eitri, who was also in attendance, asked Harry to produce something similar for the dwarves as well. Harry had no problem with that, as there were only 300 dwarves on the station. Natasha had to stop him from starting production right then and there. Eitri laughed and told him he could wait a couple of days. Everyone that knew Harry even a little had in some way mentioned that he looked like he needed to rest. Natasha told them all that she was planning on dragging him home, forcing a calming draft into him and then making him sleep for a full day. To Harry's ears that sounded like heaven, especially after the month he had had. With the possibility of another prophecy taking the people he cared for away from him, he had entered a state of mind that Natasha had never seen. Dark determination that drove him beyond all reason to accomplish a goal, pushed him further than his limits should allow, but somehow he just kept on going. No normal human being would be able to keep such a pace and maintain their sanity. She was at once both sad and proud of the man she loved. He showed in his actions a devotion that went beyond the call of duty, beyond what she thought she'd ever expect from him. Then she remembered the broken young man she had met only a few months more than 7 years ago. He was not that man anymore, but he didn't forget either, it seemed. She once again promised to herself that she would do whatever she could to ensure he never becomes that man again. When they finally arrived home, it was to find Zira already waiting in the house with 2 potions in hand. "Bruce told me to have this ready." Apparently Harry looked like, well, he looks tired and stressed. She finished lamely as she walked up to them and handed 1 potion to Natasha, who quickly twisted the cap and handed the potion to Harry, who didn't even object. He simply downed the potion and sighed in relief as it took effect. In short order they had him in bed and he was out like a light. Natasha didn't even have to give him the other potion. If in backslash or when he needed it, she'd give it to him. Likely the next morning after breakfast. The next day as he slept, Natasha arranged for Harry to get some time to work on his pet projects since he found that relaxing. He could go back to work when he was fully recovered. Bruce also handed her a couple of nutrition potions, which he had apparently run out of before, since they were in high demand for the homeless shelters at the distribution centers. They were in so much demand, in fact, that his interns and students could brew them in their sleep before they moved on to more difficult potions, and only after someone else could take their place to continue the production. Nobody minded after they found out how many people they were helping. Some of them, after being promoted, still came back to help with production when they had time. Those were the people Bruce made special note of. A week after the coronation, Harry was finally released from the island and Natasha's strict relaxation protocol. He had actually had a bit of a breakthrough with his new enchantment, after being able to take his time to think of the issue. The problem wasn't the types of magic, as much as it was that enchantment was already a kind of magic that contained and used other kinds of magic. When Natasha asked him to explain the difference, he tried and failed miserably. It was like explaining what a color looked like to a blind person. If you didn't have a magical education and an understanding of the principles of enchantment, it was almost impossible to understand. He tried anyway, by explaining how the trigger changed with different kinds of magic, and that he needed to either change the kind of magic or the trigger for the enchantment to work as designed. He ended up having to create a whole new kind of trigger that was quite bulky, in comparison to the normal kind of magic. It was an oversimplification, but she could at least understand the principle with that explanation. Harry was able to finally prove his theory by enchanting a stick, which he transfigured to look like a wand, with the new spell-holding enchantment, and fired a levitation spell into it. Natasha, being able to use such artifacts, used it on Zira to great success, making her laugh as she floated around at Natasha's indication with the wand, making her smile as she felt like a real magical witch with a wand. Harry then proceeded to add 5 stunning spells into it, which it took easily. Natasha fired them out over the ocean and watched as they sailed off until they dissipated. Harry next tried to add a stunning spell and a tickling spell, which failed miserably. It seemed that it could still only hold one kind of spell at a time, even if it could be any kind of spell. Natasha asked Harry to add as many stunners onto the wand as he could, which he did, and she pocketed the wand, stating that it would be nice to be able to stun from more than an inch away and not have to fire a bullet. Natasha's guns were already silenced, so he suspected she just liked the idea of having a wand. With that done, however, Harry got a wonderful idea. He could finally give Clint what he promised so long ago, an enchanted bow. The last 2 days of his off time was spent enchanting a bow with many useful spells. He'd still need a way to recharge the spells. But that was for when he was back at work. For now, he thought Clint would really enjoy his new toy. His first day back on the job had Harry calling for Clint to come join him in the ART room. He'd actually had to book the room, which was a first to him, but he wanted to be seen back at work after his week away. He had been told that many people were worried, and showing his face could only help with morale. "Hi Harry, Nat," Clint said as he walked up to an excited Harry and exasperated Natasha. Harry had been standing there, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet as he waited for the man, who arrived right on time. "Hey Clint, come on, you're going to love this." He all but dragged Clint into the room, with Natasha following behind him. "What am I going to love?" Clint asked as he reluctantly let himself be dragged into the room. Harry just smiled, and Natasha wasn't giving anything away. When they were in the room, it revealed itself to be what looked like a normal firing range. Clint saw a couple of guns and bows on the side, ready to be used, and when he went to go pick something, Harry stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. No, you're using this." Harry said as he stuck his hand into a pocket and removed a sleek black bow with a bowstring which was segmented into many different colors, all of which were about a finger width apart. It looked like it was made for him, and he instantly recognized the feeling Natasha had described with her skyline. When he took it, he felt a connection, like he was struck by a realization that his hand would feel empty if this bow was not within reach at all times. It was like the more modern bow he had been using before Harry had gifted him the indestructible one. He flicked his wrist and it folded up. Another flick and it was straight like a staff. A last flick and it was a bow again. "You made me an enchanted bow," Clint finally asked after the feeling seemed to settle in him. "Of course," Harry exclaimed excitedly. "I did promise you one when we first met after all. You didn't think the one I gave you last time was the enchanted bow I promised, did you? I know you've been carrying 2 bows since then and I wanted to fix that. This one is just as damage resistant as that last one as well." Clint did in fact believe it was. He couldn't help but be amused by Harry's excitement and found his own excitement mount as he realized he could feel the power emanating from the bow. "Okay, so what does it do?" he asked. "Try it and find out." Natasha said she had helped test the bow and she'd be a liar if she said she wasn't at least slightly jealous of Clint. Clint turned to walk to the weapons on display to go fetch some of the arrows he saw there. "You don't need those," Harry said as he beckoned Clint to look at a target on the far side. "Just draw the bowstring and fire." Clint, having seen many feats of magic, put his fingers in the correct location in the string automatically and drew the bow to aim at the target. When his fingers made contact with an arrow that had not been in his hand before, he smiled. "How many arrows can it make?" he asked, releasing the arrow and hitting the target dead center. "There is no limit," Harry said. "The magic recycles, so the ones that you fire disappear after a while." "How long until they disappear?" Clint asked. He wanted to ask about the colored sections on the string but thought he'd let Harry explain them first. Instead, he let loose 3 arrows in a row and hit the target in a vital spot every time. "About an hour," Harry said. "Okay, now grab the string by the red marker right above where you've been putting it and pull the arrow to the correct location." Clint nodded and lifted his fingers slightly. He felt another arrow appear and pulled it to the correct location before he knocked the arrow and let loose. He was shocked when he saw the arrow disappear, and a bolt of what was unmistakably a spell hit the target where he had aimed, following the same trajectory an arrow would have. "What was that?" he asked in awe. "That, Clint, was a stunning spell," Harry said proudly. Harry finally figured out a singular spell storage enchantment. Natasha said as she hugged Harry from behind, a large smile breaking her face. "I can store something like 20 spells per colored section," Harry said happily. "You just have to choose what spells you want. I've preloaded it with stunning, enervation, incarceration, petrification, bombardment, and unlocking spells," he said as he pointed to the colored sections. "As you move your finger over the string, you'll feel slight markings which will help you navigate the sections. These colors will fade in a week." Natasha's glove used to have different colored fingers as well, until she got used to each different function. Clint was still listening, but he was itching to try the bombardment spell, and as soon as Harry stopped talking, he drew the bow after activating the arrow in the required section and let it fly. The other side of the firing range was lit up for a second as the magical explosive spell destroyed the target entirely. "Cool," he said, still in awe. "That's not even the best part," Natasha said. "Tell him," she encouraged Harry. Harry acted hurt about her spoiling the surprise, but only for a second until the smile returned and he said to Clint, "Think about putting the bow away." Clint did just that and it disappeared. "Where'd it go?" he asked. "It's still in your hand," Harry said with a mischievous smile. Clint opened his empty hand and saw for the first time a small picture of a bow. "You made it turn into a tattoo?" he asked. "That's so cool," he exclaimed. Not even waiting for a reply as he grabbed Harry and hugged him in excitement, before letting him go and extending his hand. The bow appeared as he focused on it, and in under a minute he had emptied the bombardment spells and had started firing the incarceration spells at one of the dummies off to the side. Before long, it looked like a big ball of rope rather than a dummy. Harry wasn't even upset he had wasted the spells. He was just caught up in Clint's exuberance and watched as he tore through the ART room's firing range. The stunning spells weren't much more than flashes of light with some force, but Clint still enjoyed seeing the paper targets get blown to pieces by them. When Clint was done expending those 3 spells, it wasn't even 5 minutes later. He was breathing hard as he had been firing almost non-stop at a pace only he could ever hope to maintain while keeping his accuracy up, without being a speedster at least. He looked around for another target and Harry smirked. Using the room's magic to summon 50 Chitauri to attack him. Clint was only shocked for a second before his smile grew and he started firing again. The petrification spells stopped the enemy dead in their tracks as they face-planted, and Clint soon ran out of them. All he had left were unlocking spells and enervates, so he shrugged and tried an unlocking spell on one of the Chitauri. Instantly the creature started pulling its mask off. When the device stopped functioning as it should, and then fumbled with a grenade on its belt as it activated. Harry had made the enemy to be affected by magic as they might normally have been, and the results spoke for themselves. When a second later the grenade exploded, taking 5 of the creatures down. Clint smiled again and started firing enervates and unlocking spells at the creatures, following them all up with a normal arrow through the eye socket. Those hit with enervate still had equipment failures even as they seemed to become livelier. Just before an arrow pierced their heads, the distraction of failing equipment being enough for Clint to capitalize on it. When all the enemies were down, Clint was sweating and he looked elated. "This is probably one of the best gifts I've ever received from anyone," he said to Harry. "Thank you, you're welcome, Clint," Harry said earnestly. "Hopefully, when I set up a way to recharge your spells without having to do it myself, you won't be so eager to expend them all." "Of course," Clint said, realizing he might have taken it a bit too far. "Sorry about that." "Don't be," Harry said. "I loved seeing you enjoy that. Magic is fun, isn't it?" "Hell yeah," Clint agreed enthusiastically. "I might end up showing off a bit at home though. The kids are going to love this. They might end up begging you for some spells of their own." Harry chuckled. "I don't see why not. A couple of tickling charms here and there, some temporary color changes and a couple of noisemakers probably wouldn't hurt. Just remember to give Laura some Finnites," Natasha said, "in case the kids go too far." Clint nodded along. "You'll also have to make sure they stay away from cars or things that can be affected with magic." Harry said, "But that's for another time. I think we'll wait for birthdays or something. Don't want to spoil them all year long, right?" "Thanks for thinking of that," Clint said in relief, realizing what havoc 2 children with magic could have. How do normal families usually handle magical kids? Hermione's parents were quite happy, my own relatives not so much. Harry shrugged. His bedroom was a cupboard under the stairs until he went to the magic school. Natasha said, her mood cooling slightly. "Good riddance," Clint said instantly. "That's one family I doubt I'd miss even if I knew them." Harry just chuckled. He couldn't help but agree in their case at least. Anyway, that was the surprise. Now I've got to start working on a system that can recharge the spells with MSC shells. I'm thinking some sort of interactive robotic arm with a connection to a spell cluster that applies spells through an adamantite appendage. It should only take me a week or 2 for the more useful spells. He had started mumbling to himself as he walked off, leaving Natasha to say goodbye to Clint. "He seems to be doing better," Clint said. "Was he really as bad as I heard?" "He was a wreck," Natasha confirmed. "I can't give you some of the details as there are still some things he needs to keep secret, but he overexerted himself for far longer than anyone realizes." "You're taking good care of him," Clint said. "It was not a question. I love him," Natasha admitted. "What else would you expect? I'm glad you have each other," Clint said. "You seem to be doing better than I ever thought I'd see, and he obviously needs someone to keep him from overworking himself. He's focusing on his passion for a while. It's tiring work for him but very rewarding," Natasha said. "Don't I know it?" Clint asked, looking at the bow again before he made it vanish with a smile. "When he does what he's passionate about, he usually ends up making cool things that helps others. Like a bow that means you'll never be disarmed." Natasha nodded. "You might not have noticed because Harry can do it so quickly these days, but that bow is bonded to you. Nobody else can have the arrows or spells appear but you. I think he forgot to tell you when he left. He's obviously found his next project and couldn't wait to start." "I'll have to thank him then," Clint said, looking at the small tattoo. "Think Laura will have a problem with this?" he asked, showing her the image. "Once she sees what it actually is." "No," Natasha said easily. "She'll probably ask for matching one once Harry gets around to giving her one. She might end up getting a wand though," she said, pulling her own wand out. Clint looked at the obvious wand and cocked his head to the side. "What's yours do?" he asked. Natasha gave him an evil grin and asked, "Are you sure you want to find out?" Clint saw the glint and decided he'd rather not, so he dropped the subject. They soon made their way out of the ART room. Seeing the next people on the list just waiting for them, Harry had apparently not even waited around for them. Natasha was happy for that, as it meant his mind was on something he felt passionate for. That didn't mean she wouldn't make him pay for it later. Maybe they'd finally attempt the last section of the book that evening. They had Zira now, and Natasha and Harry had done everything else the book had to offer. It was a couple of days before Jarvis and Harry finished the design for the machine which would dispense spells into his enchantment. Harry had had enough experience with his enchantment factories to be able to make one spell enchantment at a time, and Jarvis ended up making him enchant a cylindrical metallic tube with the function, which then could be inserted into a central device. The idea being that the spell shells, as they called them, could be inserted automatically by the press of a button, and then kept in a secure location when not in use. Jarvis had the machine up and running by the end of that week, and Harry only had to focus on creating the spell shells they'd be giving people access to. For now, that meant stunning, enervation, incarceration, petrification, bombardment, and unlocking spells. Exactly what he had given Clint access to. He also created levitation, sticking light, cutting, enlargement, dispelling, booming, sonorous, for making something or someone very loud, and silencing for the opposite. He had plans to try and make portkey creation, Patronus, and shield spell shells as well. Those were more complicated though, as they required a certain amount of training to use. You couldn't just cast the spell and make it work. Many of the other spells would require at least a bit of training to use correctly, but those were the ones with the highest difficulty or the most risk for accidents. By the time they were ready to make the machine available to EPI, he was working on making an Obliviation spell shell. It would only be capable of removing a set amount of time from memory, going back from the moment the spell was cast to an hour prior at maximum. He refused to make what Tony called a neuralizer. Why would anyone need the ability to remove years of memory from someone's life or confound people into believing stupid excuses? In those cases, Harry would much rather give people the option to sign a contract and, failing that, have Xavier modify their memories. He was the expert after all. The only reason he was giving them access to an hour's worth of Obliviation was so that he or Xavier didn't need to be on call permanently. It helped in cases where children saw things no child is supposed to see as well, or a parent. When the machine was finally set up in its own location with a whole new staff to operate and secure it, Fury had started making requests for a new line of handheld weapons. To fully utilize the new capability offered to them by the new division, named Applied Metaphysics, Harry had no problem setting up a new enchantment factory for unenchanted bullet production and another to apply the new enchantment, but he refused to go into development for a firearm that could hold or produce all the spells. By his reckoning, there were divisions that would benefit from 1 or 2 spells at a time. But he couldn't justify setting any one division up with a method to use all of them without changing clips. It was simply unnecessary. He outright refused to enchant any bullets with the killing curse. He had used it on occasion when he needed to kill a target, simply because it was untraceable and quick, but he still didn't want that much power in the hands of the agents. When Fury pointed out that he'd given them access to bombardment spells, which could potentially be used on multiple targets, Harry just nodded and threatened to take them away as well. Fury quickly accepted after that. The fact was that Harry had a personal issue with that curse and Fury understood that, so he respected it for the time being. Harry could use the killing curse if forced, to ensure someone that would die anyway didn't suffer, and only when it could be proven that the target was irredeemable, but he knew that was not how it would be used by Fury. An assassination that could not be proven or protected from by Kevlar or bulletproof glass was an asset he'd love to have, and that was a slippery slope. If Fury wanted to kill people, he'd have to find another undetectable way or simply live with people knowing they were assassinated. That or set someone else up for the fall, preferably an enemy. Either way, he didn't want to know or find out. The only exceptions, of course, were the Avengers, who would have access to all the spells, Clint being the only one that would really benefit from most, if not all of them. He had happily filled his bow up. As the first person to be able to choose their spells, the next people were the Magic Corps, as they were known in EPI. Anywhere else they were called the Special Response Unit, not to be confused with Special Ops. They were able to choose what spells they wanted, but only one type of spell per weapon. New designs for different weapons were made that looked futuristic, as the spells, when fired from these weapons, turned into energy blasts of differing color, depending on the spell. No physical projectile was actually ever released, unlike the stun bullets. These bullets were to be charged and installed by the staff of that division into whatever corresponding weapons were presented, as long as the user of said weapon presented their badge, which was scanned and double-checked for permission to use said weapon. Bruce's division was the first to request healing spells be made available as well, and Harry had easily agreed. Knowing that in these cases they'd need specialized equipment, not guns with spells, when all that was set up, it was time for T'Challa's coronation. Harry had been invited as a visiting monarch with the approval of all the tribal leaders who had been brought in on Harry's secret after signing contracts. King T'Chaka had insisted. He had also insisted on a house on the island as an embassy. Harry had agreed with a smile and requested a design for the house, telling them which dimensions would fit into the expanded area of the house. He would handle the building process on his own. They would still need to abide by the rules and laws of the island, even in their embassy. That was non-negotiable. Harry and Natasha, as the future Queen of New Atlantis, took up positions next to the current King and Queen of Wakanda, while the option to challenge for the throne was offered to those assembled. It seemed that there had been some thought along those lines by the Jabari tribe leader, when representatives of that tribe showed up. M'Baku, their leader, stepped forward and challenged T'Challa, stating that Shuri scoffed at their tradition and that she was too young to be in charge of their technological developments, completely ignoring the fact that she was a certifiable genius. He also pointed at Harry and stated that the Panther cult brought disgrace on Wakanda by allowing foreigners to enter their lands and attend their sacred rituals. Harry made to object, but T'Chaka indicated for him to stay quiet. T'Challa would handle this. M'Baku was the only tribal leader that had refused to sign a contract, and so was left out of the loop about Harry's status as a king. He was respected by all the other tribal leaders as an equal, and they had started receiving the benefits of being considered friends with Harry Potter. Diseases cured and magical support being offered where they were able. M'Baku's statement had left the other leaders scowling at M'Baku and was smart enough to drop that line of accusation. He was wondering what this white man had done to gain such respect and support within Wakanda. He would not have to wait long. T'Challa accepted the challenge and called forth the royal guard, the Dora Milaje, as M'Baku's own guard took the opposing position. The fight began and Harry had to restrain himself from interfering when it looked like T'Challa would lose, only for him to rally with a cry from his parents, encouraging him. T'Challa defeated his opponent with a submission hold and the assembled tribes all rejoiced at his victory. All except the Jabari, that is. Harry waited for them to finish their ritual, presenting the new king with the mantle of his station in the form of a beaded necklace with teeth, which Harry assumed came from a panther. T'Challa finished the ritual with a cry of Wakanda forever, and everyone cheered and celebrated a final time. The Jabari kept their tongues, waiting for the event to be over so that they could leave. Harry waited for the correct moment before he decided to present his gift to the new king. He approached as everyone cheered and he cast a spell so everyone could hear him. King T'Challa, I congratulate you on your victory today. People had quieted down when he started speaking and now everyone was watching him. You conducted yourself with honor and bravery. You offered your opponent his life, when he would rather die than submit. You have shown wisdom and restraint. You have proven yourself to the hidden kingdom of New Atlantis, and I have decided to give you her blessing in the form of this gift. Harry said as he lifted his hands and an intricate armband which he had Eitre's people make for him appeared floating in the air. It was made of a dark metal that didn't reflect light, except for one spot where the silver image of a panther appeared. It was poised to strike and was so lifelike it looked like it could jump off the band at any moment. The dwarves did good work. This armband has been made with you in mind. It can only be passed down to those who share your blood. It has a special property in that it allows you to take a shape not your own for a short period should you ever need it. Harry quickly muted the spell for a moment. You'll need to anoint it with your blood. I suggest you put it on and touch some from your wound to it. It will show M'Baku why he should join us. He then allowed his voice to be carried to the crowd again. Will you accept this gift in the spirit it is presented to you? T'Challa took the armband and looked at it for a moment, before he lifted his head so that he looked at all his people. I, King T'Challa of Wakanda, accept this gift from our friend King Harry of New Atlantis. He then took the loop and put his hand through it and pushed it up to his bicep, where it shrunk to fit comfortably. He then used the same hand to touch the wound in his chest and then touched the blood to the armband. The moment he touched the band, it glowed bright gold, bright enough that everyone had to block their eyes. When the glow faded, they looked again, but instead of T'Challa, they saw a giant panther. Only the royal family would recognize the form as that of an adult Nundu. T'Challa looked down at himself and saw the black fur, and then he noticed how he was looking down at anyone on the same tier as him. Everyone was silent as they looked at the impossible. Harry smiled at him and whispered, "Give them a nice growl. It'll drive the point home for some of the slow ones." As he said it, he looked at M'Baku, who was looking on in stunned amazement. There was some fear on his features as well. If a Nundu could smile, that was what it would do just then. T'Challa lifted his head to the sky and growled in the distinctive manner of the large cats. It was not a roar but a high-pitched, dangerous sound that promised death to those that heard it in the jungle. T'Challa then looked at M'Baku and took a step towards him, growling as he did so. The sound was dangerous even if the posture of the animal did not show aggression. Harry quickly cast a spell in his direction to force the transformation to reverse. T'Challa felt his body shift, but it seemed natural somehow, and he kept his pace even as he reared up and took his human form again. He stopped in front of M'Baku. "You are welcome to join us tonight for the celebration. he offered. You may want to rethink signing that contract. M'Baku was still not sure what to think. He had just witnessed the impossible. To him it seemed that T'Challa had turned into a god. He looked at Harry then. Who was this man who could bestow powers such as that to those he deemed worthy? He looked back at T'Challa and saw the humor there. That shook him out of it, and he quickly regained his proud stance. Before he nodded in acceptance to T'Challa. Good, was all T'Challa said as he turned to walk back to Harry. M'Baku made a quick retreat to his waiting men. They would return this evening but dressed for a different occasion. When T'Challa arrived at Harry's side, Natasha and the royal family had joined him. How did you do this? He asked. Harry's been able to make items like that for a long time, Natasha said. This one, on the other hand, needed a bit more power, and since I can't give you an alternate power source, I infused it with the ability to take power from your blood and the life it contains. Harry explained. His blood? T'Chaka asked. This wouldn't be the dark kind of blood magic you told us about, would it? He whispered urgently so that nobody could hear. Actually, it is almost dark magic, but not quite, Harry clarified. I used a different kind of magical catalyst to achieve this one, he said, referring to the Asgardian magic he had used. The dark kind of magic would have turned him into an uncontrollable killing machine. T'Chaka seemed to sag in relief before curiosity made him ask, is he really a Nundu? Harry chuckled while Natasha answered for him, it's not possible to create a magical creature using this method. Instead, Harry used a Nundu as a model for the transformation, adding black fur. She looked at T'Challa. Sorry, King T'Challa, but you cannot breathe diseases at your enemies. You are almost as tough as a Nundu in that form though, as well as healing faster when transformed, Harry said, pointing to where T'Challa's wound had already shown some signs of healing. It wasn't completely healed or anything, but he had stopped bleeding. I thought it might be useful if you ever get injured and find yourself in a bad situation. You can then use your own blood to save your life and maybe do a little extra damage. He winked. This is too much, T'Challa said. He couldn't accept such a gift even if it felt wonderful to take the form of the magnificent beast. No, it's not, Harry said emphatically. We told you that we are preparing for war. Natasha agreed. When the time comes, we hope to see you there fighting to save the planet. Consider this an insurance policy, Harry said. This way, we don't have to worry about losing you too easily. I dare say your parents and sister will appreciate the added protection for you. We most certainly do, the Queen Mother said. Shuri was nodding, but she had a calculating look in her eyes. You said only those of his blood. Harry nodded, but Natasha clarified, his descendants, father to son or daughter. Harry added, why do you ask? He asked at her sudden sulking form. Shuri wants to try the transformation, T'Challa said with some humor. Before he turned to Harry again, thank you for this. My descendants will remember and thank you as well. It's no problem, Harry said before turning to Shuri. If you ask nicely, I can transform you myself, but it would be best to do so in private. I'd rather not advertise this. Shuri nodded as her smile returned. They were led onto a ship and were soon delivered to the palace where lunch was served. The celebration was to take place that evening, and T'Challa still needed to take care of his wounds. Thanks to the technology available, he didn't even have a sore muscle by the time they arrived for the celebration that evening. Harry wasn't really shocked to find a couple of bottles of SBB fire whiskey on some of the tables. He was told that they were doing quite well and could easily charge many times more than they already were, and people would still buy them. Harry had declined that one as he wasn't quite that greedy. Tony tried convincing him, but Harry didn't want it to be so expensive that only rich people could afford it. It was already considered a luxury item to have and quite expensive, but not prohibitively so, at least for the lower years. The 50-year-old still cost a small fortune. Harry provided a bottle of Tempest rum and iced vodka for the royal party. They were seated nearby as royal guests, but not at the royal family's table. The evening progressed well, and at some point M'Baku approached Harry. King Harry, he said respectfully. M'Baku. Harry returned with a slight nod. I'd like to know, M'Baku started, where did you find the armband of the Panther God? Is that what they are calling it? Harry asked. I told you, dear, Natasha said in a chiding tone. You really should name your creations, otherwise people will make assumptions and name things for you, just like your sword. M'Baku's mouth fell open before he shook himself visibly and asked, you made that? Harry sat back and smiled. Natasha pulled out a contract and put it in front of M'Baku. He looked at it and sighed. I already know you have a hidden land. That's not the only secret I have. Harry said, this is necessary to protect your king and my people. You'll note that your interests are covered as well. M'Baku looked down at the contract and read it through slowly. Then he picked up the pen and signed. At Harry's raised eyebrow he shrugged. Should I ask about the memories? I would think you get that question enough. This shocked Harry slightly. He had seen the man in the battle and assumed incorrectly that the man was a bit of a muscle-bound idiot. It seemed he was playing a role for his people. Clever, you are not what you seem. Harry said, are you? M'Baku asked. Touché. Harry conceded. To answer your question, yes, I made the armband. What do I need to do to earn one for the Jabari? M'Baku asked. Harry considered this. The man had only really spoken out against breaking tradition and disrespect. His goal was to protect his culture, not attack people's choices. That depends, Harry said. You are obviously very proud and stubborn. I have no problem with tradition. I come from a similar background where the culture was so insular, they couldn't imagine integrating with the rest of the world. Fear and hatred grew from mistrust and eventually drove a wedge in the people and drove them to civil war. I fear nothing, M'Baku said, his eyes glancing to the other side of the hall where his guards watched him closely. Harry didn't miss the look. Nothing, really, he asked, not even losing the approval of your people. M'Baku's eyes opened only fractionally before returning to normal. My people trust me to do what is best for Wakanda and them. They will expect for me to gain the favor of the man who can gift us with the power of the gods. Harry sighed. The armband is magical, not divine. It is meant to protect T'Challa and his line. It was not meant as a means to subjugate opposing tribes or cults. He explained. Besides, you and I both know he'd never use the power unfairly. He's not a tyrant. M'Baku nodded after a moment. You're right, but that will not be what is seen. Even if only T'Challa and his line has that power, someone will try and take it from them. The other cults will grow jealous if they don't have the same power. Why did the gods bless one cult and its worshippers? But not all. Harry thought about it. He had not considered that before. It was entirely likely that he had just painted a bigger target on T'Challa's back. He looked at M'Baku. So you want me to endow you and the other cults with power to prevent T'Challa from becoming a victim of greed? M'Baku said nothing for a moment before saying, I will admit to being jealous of the power myself. I don't think lying to you now would help me secure your allegiance. More importantly, if you gifted my line with the power of the gods, it would secure my descendants a place of power and security within the Jabari. I may be a leader of many, but I must also provide for my family. Harry considered this for a bit and Natasha decided to ask a couple of questions. What about the other Jabari? Why shouldn't Harry offer the power to another line in your tribe? Couldn't he meet with them and judge them on merit and ability? What makes your line special? What makes T'Challa's line special? M'Baku countered. I can see that his father was a good leader, and his sister, while disrespectful to our ways, is very intelligent, but that does not explain why you chose him. I chose him because I saw how much his people loved and respected him. Harry said easily. He wasn't even the king, but his people supported him without fail. They trust him entirely. If nothing else, that is enough for me. I do also have other reasons, but all you need to know is that he is qualified. And you didn't answer my question. Natasha said, why your line? My people trust me as well. M'Baku said, when was the last time you were challenged for the leadership of your tribe? Harry asked. When M'Baku didn't answer, Harry thought he understood. I tell you what, I've got an idea of how your culture functions and I will set something up. It will allow you to claim the power you seek, while strengthening your support base in your own tribe and especially for the white gorilla cult. I will have one requirement though. What do you want? I will not supply you with vibranium. M'Baku said quickly, I don't need your vibranium, I've got another supplier that gets me all I need from another source. Harry said easily, there is no other source of vibranium on the planet. M'Baku denied, getting a little angry. Did this man already find a way to steal from them? You're right, Natasha said while Harry just smiled. Our source is not on this planet. M'Baku looked between their faces in shock. They didn't seem to be lying. Who are you people? He finally asked. They are the friends and allies of Wakanda. T'Challa cut into their conversation. M'Baku stopped trying to look for ill intentions where there is none to be found. All the elders of the tribes have seen his island and know his motivations. We've even seen some of what he's done with his own vibranium. The only weapon he's made so far is Urubane, he said, indicating Harry's hip. M'Baku looked at the weapon in interest. Harry quirked his eyebrow at T'Challa, who nodded, and Harry put his hand on the sheath and withdrew the weapon with his other hand. No need to give away all his secrets. This is Urubane. It is an enchanted weapon that can cut through basically anything and is as indestructible as I could make. He offered the sword to M'Baku carefully. M'Baku took the sword and found it was heavier than Harry had made it look. He was a strong man too, so it impressed him with how easily Harry had handled it. He gave it a swing or two, but it never seemed to move the way he wanted it to. He handed it back to Harry and was surprised when Harry went through a couple of slashes in the air that he couldn't quite follow, so fast was it, before sheathing it. How are you doing that? M'Baku asked. Magic, Harry shrugged. Don't feel bad, it's made to only react properly to me and those I designate. M'Baku accepted this easily enough. Everything he had seen indicated Harry was trying to be forthright and open. What do you want from me then? To provide my tribe with the power of Hanuman. If I were to provide you the opportunity to claim power for your tribe, you will respect T'Challa's rule until the time comes for the next challenge to the throne. Harry said, I don't mean you have to respect him because that's really up to you, but you'll have to accept that he's earned his right to the throne and not go against him just to be difficult. If he needs you when the battle starts, you must promise to be available to assist him and his allies. M'Baku and T'Challa looked at him, shocked that he would make this offer. Why? M'Baku asked, are you expecting war? I'll leave that up to T'Challa to inform you about, but the short answer is yes, we're expecting enemies of all mankind to come to Earth at some point. Harry confirmed, so what's your answer? Can you respect and support your king until the next day of challenge? M'Baku didn't know how to answer, so he took a moment. The white gorilla cult had been exiled to the peaks of the mountain for a long time. If he offered their support to the king, he'd be going against his people's wishes. On the other hand, if he did offer support, he'd be fulfilling his role to his people in ensuring that they got some of the power on offer. He had no doubt that Harry would likely offer something to the other tribes now, even if he refused, making them more powerful, and having his people miss out on the opportunity. He didn't think they'd react better to that choice either. You offer me a difficult deal. M'Baku said, either way my people will not like the choice I've made. No, T'Challa said, once the elders of your tribe have been given the chance to see the island and learn what is on offer, you'll be celebrated as a hero for making it possible. All you have to do is say that it was part of the deal, and you'll have received more from this than they can object to. What is on this island that makes it so valuable? M'Baku asked. Magic, Harry said with a grin. Most importantly, we now have access to one that can secure our minds like none before could. T'Challa said, indicating Harry, our primary resource is now safe. You could walk by the entrance to the mine and never know it is there. Hidden by hologram, M'Baku scoffed. No more secure than what we already have. No, T'Challa argued. It is hidden in such a way that you physically couldn't find it unless you knew where to look. People who have worked the mines all their lives could not find the entrance or even remember where it used to be. M'Baku nodded after a moment. It seemed this foreign king may yet improve his situation. I'll give my support to the king once I can prove to my people that it is to their benefit. Then he turned to T'Challa, when the time comes. I'll expect a new trade agreement. My people have need of more resources. M'Baku and T'Challa continued their discussion as they walked away, and Harry turned to Natasha at her raised eyebrow. What? He asked. What were you planning for the other tribes? She asked. Harry looked around and cast a quick privacy spell or two. I'm thinking we can set up a series of trials to test those wishing to gain power in their tribe. I'll just have to set it up so that the armbands stop working after a year or when an appropriate occasion occurs. We can discuss that with the elders. That way someone else can fight for the right to carry them. Natasha was nodding along. We'll just have to set things up to follow their traditions and possibly set up the trials to focus on the aspects that the cult they represent value. She then looked at Harry through narrowed eyes. I noticed you didn't tell T'Challa about that other feature. Are you thinking of adding it to the others' armbands as well? Harry nodded and smiled. It does make sense, but I'll have to come up with a way for it to work for each line in each cult. The blood magic wouldn't work otherwise. Natasha nodded. And the reason why you didn't tell T'Challa? I will, Harry said. I just haven't had the opportunity to tell him in private. I don't think it's something we want to advertise to all the tribes just yet. Natasha accepted that, and they sat back and enjoyed the festivities. It was much later that evening when Harry had the opportunity to speak to T'Challa again. Harry took him aside and just out of earshot of the royal guard and anyone else, and finally got the opportunity to tell him of the final feature on the armband. So there's one more thing you must know about that armband. You remember the moving portraits in my memories? Harry started. T'Challa nodded and allowed Harry to continue. The magic in them comes from a form of blood magic. It was considered to be one of the exceptions to blood magic's stigma in that it's considered benign. What does that have to do with the armband? T'Challa asked. I'm getting to that, Harry assured him. When I created the armband, I noted that part of the magic wanted to affect the mind of the user, since the original magics of its kind turned the mind of the user into that of the animal. For me to fix that, I had to point it in another direction. I ended up using a different magic to direct the mind part to. T'Challa was not certain he followed, so he allowed Harry to continue. The magic on the armband uses that function to save a copy of your memories and personality to itself, updated every time it is blooded. Harry finally explained. The magic on the portraits did use blood magic after all, and it would only know anything from the time of its making. And what happens with those memories? T'Challa asked. They become available to the next generation, Harry said with a smile. He knew how important ancestors were to their culture. T'Challa was shocked to say the least. This was a greater gift than he had ever thought possible. Why do you do so much for me and my people? He finally asked, not knowing what else to ask. It's what I do, Harry said negligently. T'Challa grabbed Harry's shoulder and said, This is no small thing, Harry. You don't know what this will mean to our people. To have the wisdom of our ancestors available to us in times of need will give our people great comfort. Well, this armband is bound to your line, Harry said. Your father could likely add his own blood to the magic, but he'd have to wear it and blood it, meaning he'll transform. T'Challa nodded, then he smiled. He'll want to be king again after that, he joked. The transformation made me feel so powerful, like nothing could stop me. Like I could run all day and never even need to stop and rest. I can only imagine that my father would like that. Harry was glad T'Challa had taken the news in the way he had meant it. I imagine he would. He agreed. Of course you don't have to make him the offer, Harry said with an innocent look. T'Challa didn't fall for it but responded seriously. If I could offer my father's wisdom to my children and their children, I would do so. I would do it even if it cost me the use of the armband. Just let me know before you have T'Chaka use it. I'll have to make a temporary change so that it doesn't think your father is the next generation, Harry said with a smirk. How will it work? T'Challa asked. You would just will it, Harry said. The person you wish to speak to will appear in your head when you close your eyes and focus. The only qualifier being that the person you wish to speak to would have to be dead for them to become available in your mind. T'Challa nodded, thinking that made sense. What about the other cults? What about the other tribes? He asked. I'm planning something fun for the other 3 cults and will discuss things with you and the elders, Harry said. As for the other clans, I suppose I could think about something along the lines of a new enchantment that functions like the part you are using for the memories, but I can't offer the power to all the tribes. T'Challa nodded. Of course. I was just hoping we could do something for our people as well. Would the people need to sign contracts? Harry thought about it for a moment, then shook his head. No, I don't think that will be necessary. If I do find a way to set these things up, it will work like your armband, with only one person being able to use it at any given time. They would not be able to prove it to outsiders, so there is no risk. Harry thought about it some more before continuing. I think you would need to be able to produce these, since new lines and branch families are formed often. I'll probably need to set you up with a way to enchant items with this magic. For that, I'll need time. T'Challa smiled. I thank you for your consideration and I look forward to a bright future where our people stand together. Likewise, Harry said, taking T'Challa's offered hand. I'm thinking we can put Wakanda in charge of our space exploration division once we've taken care of everything here on Earth. Put those people who think you're a country of farmers in their place. Space exploration? T'Challa asked. Sure, Harry said. We've got a couple of deep space exploration ships being built right now that we plan on using to go to unexplored galaxies in the universe. The magic we'll be using has already been created and we're putting plans in place already. What does EPI not have in their plans? T'Challa asked, sounding impressed and with some amusement. The next week flew by and Harry had finally completed his plans for the trials. He still had many other projects, but he didn't want to leave the Wakandan people waiting too long. He had, however, gone to try and destroy the skull of Surtur with the sword of Gryffindor. It was unfortunately a failure. Perhaps it was because the entirety of Surtur's soul was in the skull, or maybe his fiery nature burned the venom away. But either way, he'd have to look for another option, as even a killing curse refused to sever the connection between the skull and the soul, like it did with the living. When his preparations for the trials of the cults of Wakanda was complete, he had prepared the room of requirement at the Avengers mansion and set up a portal from Wakanda to the trials. Harry joined the elders as they stood in front of the gathered people. T'Chaka walked forward as the representative of the elders now that he had given his seat on the throne to his son. My people, he started, we have long been a people of tradition and honor. Today we are gathered to start a new tradition that will make us even stronger and bind us in unity, as we strive to strengthen our different clans. T'Chaka's speech was very moving to his people, and after the niceties were over he explained the rules. Inside the room there would be 4 different paths, each marked for the different cult. He explained that his son would also be taking the trial even if nobody had decided to challenge him for this contest. T'Challa didn't want to encourage the rumors that he didn't deserve the power he was given, and he wanted to prove himself. Soon the participants were ready, and a couple of people from each of the other cults had gathered. Both the Panther and the Crocodile cult only had one participant. The lion, a white gorilla cults both had multiple people competing for the honor of receiving their armbands. The participants were through the door instantly, and an illuminated board, which Harry had set up, kept track of their progress, even if it didn't show the actual participants or what they were doing. The traps and challenges were all suggested and approved by the elders, so that nobody could object. It came as no surprise to Harry when T'Challa finished his task first, going through the portal at the end to rejoin the people waiting for the other victors. M'Baku finished shortly after T'Challa and joined him in waiting for the last two. The last two were met with cheers from their people, so Harry suspected they were good choices. Harry quickly modified the room to allow the last of the participants out, and when they came back he closed the portal. Each of the victors had brought with them a totem that represented their animal, which was at the end of each course for the victor to take and prove their victory. The totems were to be handed to the elders of each cult, who would then accept the victory and hand the armband to the victor. On receiving the armbands, each victor was to put theirs on and blood it, to confirm that the armband accepted them. Harry had to work a ward onto each that would detect evil intent. Should the victor be planning to use it for evil, they would not activate for them. He had warned the elders of this as well, and they approved wholeheartedly. They did not tell the participants, hoping their people would prove themselves to the other elders. The four were soon standing in front of the gathered tribes. They were each handed a ceremonial dagger and asked to cut their palm and blood their armbands. As each of them did so, there was a flash of light, and even Harry had to shield his eyes. In that moment, as Harry closed and shielded his eyes, he saw the image of people with the heads of panther, lion, monkey, and crocodile, all looking directly at him. Nothing was said, but Harry got the feeling that they were giving their approval of him. As the flash faded, Harry opened his eyes again and he looked at the results of his latest enchantments. The Nundu-like panther looked proud and strong. The silver-backed gorilla, who was on the same scale as the panther, beat at its chest with its massive fists and roared. The lion roared and looked around the people with its sharp eyes. The crocodile, which was probably the scariest of the creatures by Harry's reckoning, hissed and raised itself onto its hind legs like no real crocodile could do. It easily stood at the same height as the gorilla, even though its body was more slender. The people cheered after the initial shock, and Harry forced the transformations to revert. They would learn to will the change back on their own over time, but for now he didn't want to scare the people. Once the champions stood before their people again, T'Challa took the stage again. It had been decided that they would tell the people of the added benefit the armbands presented, so his announcement of the fact was met with thunderous applause, and a lot of hungry looks in Harry's direction he wasn't necessarily comfortable with. He had a suspicion that people would be very happy once he set them up with a means to speak to their ancestors. He just hoped he wasn't there for that. For now, he resolved only to tell Natasha of what he had seen during the flash. Better not to cause a fuss. There was another celebration that night, and Harry and Natasha enjoyed the festivities. Harry received many words of gratitude that night, and quite a few jealous looks were sent both to him and Natasha. T'Challa later explained to Harry that it seemed a few of the people thought he was a messenger of the gods and they wanted to spend time with him, to impart his great wisdom unto them. Fortunately, it seemed the other jealous looks were skin deep. Jealousy over looks and attraction was much simpler to handle, by simply ignoring it, but not blatantly so. They didn't want to give offense either, after all. The evening went by without a hitch, and they spent the night in a room that was provided for them in the palace. The next morning they had breakfast with the royal family and left to return to their lives and responsibilities. It was 2 weeks before the wedding, and Harry was working in his office, when he felt a jolt of magic coming in his general direction. It caught him off guard as he was in a Fidelius-protected location. His first reaction, though, was to throw up a shield. The magic dissipated on the shield and Harry jumped into a defensive position. "I told you it was a bad idea," Loki's voice said from the door, where a gun disappeared. It was one of the weapons that shot the magical charges, so Harry relaxed, knowing the weapons were very well protected. The only people that had access couldn't attack him with them, not maliciously at least. It was worth a shot. Tony's voice said that made sense. Tony had unrestricted access to that division and had quite a few of the guns. Even Pepper carried one of them in her purse. Tony had obviously changed the design specifically for her, and it looked like a toy, so that even if someone stole it from her, they would think it was useless. Harry then paired it to her so that nobody but her could fire it. "What are you two up to?" Harry asked as he opened the door fully and lifted an eyebrow at the two men standing on the other side. "About that," Loki said with a mischievous smile. "No," Tony insisted. "Don't tell him, it's supposed to be a surprise." Harry looked between the two and sighed. "Did you at least run your plans by Natasha?" he asked. Tony had not been as careful as he had hoped. He'd been in and out of his office all day, and once or twice when he received a call, he'd leave the office before answering. "Should I be bringing a wad of singles?" Damn you, Harry, Tony said. Couldn't you at least act like you didn't know, he asked. Is there no on the singles? Harry asked, smirking at Tony's disappointment. Loki joined him in the smirk. Apparently he wanted to kidnap you, something about tradition. And it would have worked if you could do it, but no. You think it might be considered an attack and break your contract? Tony scoffed. Here's a newsflash, you've been casting spells at each other for years now without penalties. That's not the same, Loki said. Knocking him out would leave him defenseless. I can't not see that as a violation of the contract. So should I get dressed? Harry asked. Nah, what you've got on is fine, Tony said, and no, we're not telling you where we are going. I can at least still surprise you with that. Harry shrugged and followed them to the balcony at Tony's penthouse where a limo floated next to the balcony. Nice, Harry exclaimed. When did you make this one? I just finished it last week. Tony said. I was busy with something else for a while before that. I noticed, Harry said as he got in and noticed the interior was much larger. Expansion runes, he asked. You realize that means you can't use this in public, right? For now, Tony said with a nod. This is just for PI and those in the know. The only downside is that it can't be taken to public venues in its current state. Imagine a valet looking in and seeing the size difference and you then tossing him the keys to park your flying car. Harry said with a laugh. Friday would do that for me, Tony said easily. As for them seeing in Confundus, why add space expansion to begin with? Harry asked. It's a bloody limo, it has space, it's the bloody point. Isn't it? You can always use more space, Tony said easily as they sat down on one of many comfortable-looking couches, and Loki poured them each a drink from the small bar area. The car looked much like a normal sitting room with comfortable chairs and even a giant TV on one wall. Harry also noted 2 doors with signs for male and female bathrooms. He looked out the window and noted it looked like they were rising up into the darkening sky. Where are we headed? He asked with suspicion on his face. Don't worry about it, Tony said with a smile. At least there would be some surprises for him. And to answer your earlier question, Natasha is well aware of our plans for the evening, Loki said as he sat down as well. Apparently she's having a similar evening hosted by her maids of honor. Harry nodded. They wouldn't need to ask him for permission as he trusted both of them. He also understood why Tony was being kept in check. He'd rent an entire strip club and fill a pool with alcohol if given half a chance. They listened to the TV as it played some music videos, streamed directly from the internet through the onboard ERDR, and enjoyed a drink while chatting about whatever took their fancy. 10 minutes later they heard the sound of something clamping onto the door. The TV shut itself off and the lights in the ceiling dimmed and started lighting up in a sequence that ran from the center of the room towards the door, indicating for them to follow the light. When they got to the door, Harry looked out the window and saw something that made him laugh. The party saucer, he exclaimed happily. The party saucer, Tony agreed with a smile as he opened the door to what looked like a passageway made entirely of glass, which was why Harry could see the saucer. They walked the long hallway, probably meant to give you a chance to admire the saucer with its many flashing lights, and Harry noted there was another landing spot nearby. Bifrost, he asked, pointing at the spot. We wouldn't want to leave some of your friends from Asgard out of the fun now, would we? Tony said with another smirk. Oh, that reminds me, can you quickly make a portkey to here and back to Heimdall's post for him? He refuses to join us without a quick way back to Asgard. Harry nodded and conjured a disc, which he then turned into a portkey. Levitating it, he activated the magic and watched as it disappeared. Not 5 seconds later, Heimdall appeared in front of them. My prince, Heimdall greeted Harry and indicated for them to walk past and take the lead. Hi Heimdall, Harry said, stopping to take his hand and shake it. Thank you for joining us. It is my pleasure, Heimdall said. It has been a long time since I've been able to leave my post, and while I have grown to like my solitude, it is refreshing to have the option to leave. You should have said something, Harry exclaimed. You must understand, Heimdall said. I already see most of everything. I don't miss out on anything. The only reason I am here is because I know you would prefer I attend. Damn right, Harry said, making a mental note to invite Heimdall to join them more often. Tony typed in a code at the door and it slid open to reveal a small reception room, most likely originally intended as an airlock. They entered and the first door closed. A second later the inner door opened and a massive cheer arose from the assembled guests. The room was filled with a lot of people. Everything from close friends to friendly co-workers. Suddenly the large limo made sense. There were representatives from the X-Men, Fantastic Four, Guardians of the Galaxy, Asgardians, Avengers, Ravagers, Nova Corps, Wakanda, and even some people from EPI's different divisions. Tony had extended the invitation to the heads of the different branches as well at that point, and it seemed not one of them had turned the invitation down. Seeing so many people, all of which he knew and had at least had one conversation with over the years, Harry smiled broadly. He had noted that almost everyone currently present were male. He started worrying about the implications of that, but before he could think about it too much, a stream of waitresses, all in very skimpy outfits, walked from a side room and started mingling with the guests, trays of drinks and snacks in hand. "Tony, what is this?" Harry asked, indicating the new arrivals. "Well, they aren't strippers, I'll tell you that," Tony said. "They are all models and being paid very well to flirt with everyone but not actually do anything with them." "But the saucer?" Harry asked. "Oh yeah, they all signed contracts," Tony said. "I don't think they believed me at first, but once we arrived here they were more than happy. Apparently they'd have done the job for free for the view," he said, indicating the center of the very large circular room. They walked to the spot and Harry noted people looking down and followed suit. "Wow," he said, seeing the unobtrusive view of North America. It was spectacular at this time of day as the sun was just setting on the western side of the continent and you could see the lights of some of the cities illuminating their parts of the continent. "Nice, right?" Tony said, looking down as well. "We're not actually in orbit, which is why we're getting such a nice view. But we are high enough that you'd need a rocket to reach us. Couldn't you have just used a large mirror?" Loki asked Tony. "I suppose I could have, but it's not the point of the experience," Tony argued. "Also, Harry couldn't know about this and he makes the mirrors, at least the custom ones." Harry decided to mingle a little and started chatting to his many friends. He had noted a bar and wasn't shocked to see Eldrin pouring drinks. He had not even stood at the bar for 1 second before a drink was standing ready for him to take. Harry smiled and shook his head. Eldrin smiled, nodded and started making another drink, placing it in front of another astonished patron, just as they arrived at the bar. Harry was almost certain someone was going to try and steal him from Atlantis at some point. Eldrin was probably the most skilled and talented bartender in the entire world, and he'd be surprised if someone hadn't already offered him alternate employment. He enjoyed his drink and continued mingling. At some point he noted people standing in groups and watching something, so he approached and found they were looking at a pensive tablet with a reel of what looked like funny moments from over the years projected over it. He had no doubt that Loki had set that up, as some of the situations were from moments he had fallen for Loki's traps. He had to admit that it looked funnier when viewed from outside. Tony was sitting to the side and watching as the girls flirted outrageously with the heroes in attendance. Harry sat down beside him and asked, "Having thoughts I should tell Pepper about?" Tony smirked. "Maybe, I'm just sad I haven't figured out X-ray glasses yet." As he said it, he dropped his sunglasses over his eyes. "The things I would see right now," he said as he indicated one of the girls who were bent over to pick something up from the ground, giving him a perfect view of her sculpted rear. Harry chuckled at that and touched a finger to the bridge of the sunglasses. He focused for a moment and released his magic. Tony's eyes grew wide as he was suddenly able to see through the clothing. "What, you figured it out?" he asked incredulously. Harry held up a hand and whispered urgently at Tony, "I know you were hoping for strippers, so I'll give you access to this for the next hour. After that the enchantment will disappear. You will never ever mention this to anyone, am I clear?" Tony realized Harry was deadly serious and he didn't want to squander the opportunity, so he nodded. He had no illusions about Harry letting him keep the memory if he let this slip. "How am I not looking through anyone else's clothing? Not that I mind," he said quickly. "It's not like I want to see you or any man naked, but how is it differentiating between what I want to and don't want to see?" Harry sighed. "Ease magic. Normal X-ray vision works to universally allow for sight through physical objects. I added intent and bound it to you. You can see through only what you want to." Tony's eyes were brimmed with actual tears. "You're the best man," he said while pulling Harry into a one-armed hug. "No, actually, you're the best man, which is why you're getting this. I will never do this again since if anyone finds out I'll be in so much trouble I don't even want to think about it," Harry said with a shudder. "You too, Pepper finds out and it'll be both our asses, not to mention Frigga. What about your mother?" Odin said as he approached. Harry stiffened and he realized he had forgotten the Asgardians in attendance. Specifically an all-seeing one, who now knew something Harry would very much like to keep secret. "I was just mentioning that Frigga will be happy to hear that Tony didn't get any strippers," Harry said, lying to the All-Father for the first time he could remember. The look on Odin's face told him he did not believe Harry. The look Odin had when he looked at Tony, and specifically the glasses, was tinged with a bit of humor too. "Yes, let's hope she doesn't hear anything of the sort," he said with a pointed look. "Understood," Harry said with a sigh, realizing Odin had decided to act like he didn't know exactly what was going on. "How are you enjoying the party?" he asked, changing the subject. Odin nodded and turned to survey the gathered revelers, some of whom were dancing with the models on the dance floor, which was the spot you could see through. "The music is unfamiliar to me, but I'm liking it so far. A man after my own heart," Tony said. "None of this dubstep bull." "Hey, dubstep will never die," came a familiar voice from behind them. Harry turned and saw the face of someone he hadn't seen in quite a while. Wade, how'd you get here? I invited him, Tony said with a grin. When you mentioned him being a wild one, I figured he'd liven up the party. I called him wild because he's certifiable. Harry said, that being said, he is fun, isn't he? A beautiful girl at his side asked. She was smiling though, and Harry wondered why she looked familiar. You know the girls are off limits, right? Tony asked him, looking at the girl beside him. Hey X-Specs, get your googly eyes off my girl, Wade said, a look of real anger crossing his face. Then the anger faded entirely as he continued with a smile. Your girls may be off limits, but I brought my own. Tony's face lost some color as he suddenly snapped his head up and pushed the glasses to sit on his head. Sorry about that. I didn't know. Harry had finally remembered meeting her one time at the bar Wade worked out of. They were on each other like a rash at the time. Vanessa, right? Harry asked, offering her a hand to shake. Vanessa shook his hand with a smile. Good to see you again, Harry. Did I ever thank you for fixing this one's personality problem? I didn't have a personality problem. Wade objected. I was just fugly, and that was your personality problem, Vanessa said. Then she turned to Harry. He really thinks I just love the way he looks, when in fact I love the way he takes it up the ass for me every International Women's Day. Harry's mouth was hanging open at her statement. He did not notice that Tony had a similar look on his face while Odin just smiled. Even he could see that they were a very devoted couple, not necessarily very clean or sane, but very devoted. God, I love you, Wade exclaimed before kissing her hungrily before he led her away in the direction of the bathrooms. Tony snapped out of it and called after them, please don't fornicate in the bathroom. Too late, Wade called back with a smile that made Tony's skin crawl. I get it, Tony said before Harry could say I told you so. Next time I'll discuss the guest list first. Harry nodded. They do seem to be made for each other though. Love takes many forms. Odin said wisely, what we see as strange makes the world of sense to others. I don't know, Loki said as he approached them from behind Odin. They looked perfectly normal to me. That makes sense, Tony said with a roll of his eyes. Harry continued on his rounds and approached the warriors three who were ogling the girls. How are you enjoying the entertainment? He asked. Verily, Midgard must have the most beautiful women in all of creation, Fandral exclaimed as he looked after one who was swaying her hips in a way that seemed to have him hypnotized. And they wear so little, it's like they are taunting me. That's the idea, I think, Harry said. Bachelor's parties often have strippers, but fortunately there won't be any today. I don't think anyone here could compare with my Natasha anyway. Truly you are a lucky man, Volstagg said, to have found the love of your life so early. We of the Aesir sometimes look for hundreds, thousands of years before finding a paramour that suits us as well as she suits you. I won't deny that I am a lucky bugger, Harry said proudly. Noting Volstagg's eyes were less on the girls, and more on the platters they carried with snacks, drinks, and shots. Volstagg already had a platter filled with something of everything on it, but he always had a great appetite. Hagen was sipping a beer and didn't look all that interested in the girls as he was sizing up some of the heroes in attendance. Harry chuckled when he realized the man was itching for a bit of a fight, but doubted there'd be any fights here tonight. He left them to go chat with Ben Grimm, who had found a comfortable seat and was drinking from a massive goblet. Harry, he welcomed him. Fun little get-together you've got going here. Tony arranged it, Harry said, knowing that Ben already knew it. I'm just happy to see how many people showed up. Ben scoffed, knowing you these aren't even half your friends. Then he pointed at where Johnny was dancing with one of the models. I'm just worried he can't keep it in his pants. Knowing Johnny, he's already slept with half the girls here, Harry said. I'm surprised he hasn't been slapped yet. Ben smiled a huge smile. You weren't here 10 minutes ago then. He pointed at a brunette who was speaking to Steve, who looked uncomfortable. That one was apparently under the impression that he was going to call her the next day. Harry chuckled in amusement. That Johnny is quite prolific in his conquests. I'm surprised that he hasn't picked up any diseases yet, that we know of. Ben qualified. I've got no doubt it will happen one of these days. That or an angry boyfriend or husband, Harry trailed off. Nah, he doesn't date them old enough to be married yet. Ben joked. I thought you two were getting along better these days. Harry asked. Oh, we are. It doesn't make it any less fun to joke at his expense. Ben smiled. Harry conceded the point and changed the subject. How are you and Alicia doing these days? He asked. We're still on cloud 9. Ben said with a goofy smile. That girl is amazing. I'm happy for you, Harry said with a smile of his own. Any chance we'll be hearing wedding bells in your future? Ben's smile only widened. Actually, I'm hoping to pop the question on the 30th if that's okay with you. So many of our friends will be there, I couldn't think of a better time. You'll need to ask Natasha, Harry said seriously. I doubt she'd mind. But this is her big day and I'm not agreeing to anything without her knowledge. You'll do well, came the voice of Reed Richards. As long as you always remember that she's the boss anyway, Harry didn't reply to that immediately. He knew when to take charge but sometimes forgot to delegate. He knew she knew his limitations though and would always know when to step in. I like to think it's a partnership, he finally said honestly. Reed conceded the point with a nod of his head. Fair enough. Then he turned to Ben. Has any more of his conquests made an attempt yet? No, it seems he's lucky in that Tony didn't hire too many floozies, Ben said with a smirk as he watched Johnny talking to a new girl. The previous one must have decided he wasn't worth it. Ben smiled. That makes two, he thought to himself. He intended fully on keeping account on how many rejections Johnny received. Harry excused himself and moved on to the next group. Gamora and Nebula weren't with the other Guardians, so Harry wondered if they were at Natasha's due. How are you enjoying the party, Drax? Harry asked as he stepped in next to the big man sitting at a high table. I'm enjoying the music and the libations, Drax enthused. Too bad all the women are so ugly. It must be difficult to contemplate laying with them even if it is to propagate the species. Harry laughed at the statement. One day, Drax, you will show me what a beautiful woman looks like to you. Then he pointed at the girls. By our standards, these girls are quite beautiful. These ones in particular are considered to be models of what to strive for. Really? Drax asked with genuine concern on his features. Really? Peter Quill said from Drax's other side. He was carrying a tray of shots. I haven't had the chance to taste any of these shots before, and when I got to the bar to ask, the bartender just handed me this tray. I didn't even need to ask. Eldrin is an amazing bartender with a slight affinity for divination. He can usually prepare for you what you want before you ask for it. Harry said, he can see the future. Peter asked, only kind of. Harry said, he says he gets a feeling. He doesn't actually experience or see things, he just kind of knows. That's weird but useful. Peter said, shrugging, makes the best drinks I've ever tasted. Harry confirmed, but you should know this, you've been to the island recently, haven't you? Quill is an idiot. He doesn't know what's going on around him half the time. Rocket said as he joined them and took a shot from the tray and downed it. They had picked a table next to a platform so that Rocket could more easily join the high table and not need to climb with a drink in hand. Hey, that's mine, Peter objected. Good for you, you're getting better at noticing stuff. Rocket said with a smirk. It's an open bar, dum-dum, you can get more shots whenever you like, he said as he took another shot from the tray. This time he didn't enjoy it so much, so he chased it by downing his glass of fire whiskey. Time for a refill, he said and walked off again. He's enjoying himself, Harry said. He's enjoying the sobering charm is more like it, Peter groused as he looked forlornly at the two empty shot glasses. Harry decided to take pity on him and looked over to the bar where Eldrin was already holding out two replacements for him with a smile on his face. Cocky bugger. Harry mumbled good-naturedly as he summoned the shot glasses and put them on the tray. There you go, he said to Quill. Thanks, Harry, Peter said. Then he started sniffing the shots to find what he would like to have first. Harry had no doubt Rocket would be back to torment him soon, so left before that fight started. He didn't miss Drax smiling and taking a shot and downing it as well. When Peter objected again, Drax laughed heartily. There were a couple of activities during the course of the evening, mostly to make fun of Harry, and a couple of good-natured pranks pulled at his expense. The worst of which was a line of 20 shots, 10 of which they made Harry conjure as any flavor shots, and the last of which was Asgardian-grade fire whiskey. Tony's attempt at getting Harry stumbling drunk succeeded by the end of the evening, and he was forbidden from casting sobering charms on himself. The guests were offered the sobering charm pills by the time they left, so that nobody had to worry about hangovers. Loki had sneakily laced a charm on Harry that would reduce the efficacy of the sobering charm if he decided to cast it on himself before bed that night, which was more successful than he thought. When Harry woke the next day, it was to a pounding headache and a smirking Natasha. Fortunately, his wizarding heritage stopped him from suffering from alcohol poisoning, but the after effects and dehydration hit him like a heavyweight boxer, and he stumbled to the bathroom in a hurry to avoid emptying his stomach on the floor. After finding his equilibrium and successfully casting a sobering charm on himself, he felt a lot better, but he was still in a foul mood. He swore to himself that he would return what he got in spades when he arranged Tony's bachelor party. Loki would feel the repercussions of his trickery as well, when Harry thought of a good enough punishment. Natasha took it all in stride and playfully mocked him for his inability to perform his duties in the bedroom the previous night. His spirit was willing, but his body was passed out the moment his head touched the pillow. When she thought he had enough, she took pity on him and served him a healthy breakfast and a nutrition potion to restore his body. She apparently didn't suffer the consequences of overindulging due to good friends and a sobering charm pill. She was also just happy they didn't wait for a day before the wedding. She'd be pissed if Harry showed up in his current foul mood. The morning of the wedding was, as always, a beautiful day on the island. Natasha had decided to have the wedding right there on the island as it was the safest place on the planet at the moment. She had no illusions that there would be some form of intrigue otherwise. The invitations that were sent to the guests were also portkeys that would bring people to the reception area. Of course, only those contracted would be allowed to attend, so it was by invitation only. There were exceptions like Peter and MJ, but they were both contracted and Harry wanted to give Peter the chance to ask the girl. The morning of the wedding found Harry waking up in Tony's house, while Natasha had the company of her maids of honor in Harry's house. They were sticking with the tradition of not seeing each other until the ceremony. The groom's job was simple, really: get dressed, show up and say yes. The bride usually had a whole day of pampering, including manicures, pedicures, facials, hairstylists, and makeup artists. Natasha was naturally beautiful though, and she kept herself in prime condition so that she could work her charms at any moment. So she was relaxing and drinking a mimosa, while looking at the other women panic over tiny things. Harry had even helped them the previous day, casting spells to protect their already perfect nails and hair. All they needed was to dress and do their makeup. Harry, on the other hand, was sitting down for a light breakfast, before Wolverine sat him down for a hot shave. He didn't need a straight razor either. Natasha had Harry try on many different styles of tuxes, and had finally settled on a standard black and white tux. With coattails and a green tie, Harry didn't really care. As long as she showed up, he'd wear a wizard's robe straight out of popular fiction. Harry and his best man, Tony, and groomsmen Bruce, Phil, Fury, Thor, and Loki were all relaxing when the guests started to arrive, signaling 1 hour before the ceremony would begin. Harry took the time to start welcoming the many guests as they arrived, and Tony did his job as best man by showing people to their seats and giving out pamphlets with the agenda. It had been decided to keep the staff from the room in reserve until later. In the meanwhile, the groomsmen accompanied Harry and tried to make him nervous about the commitment he was making with the rest of his life. The fact that he already had both a fiancée and a girlfriend kind of broke their steam. There was no division between the bride's guests and the groom's guests, as they didn't have divided friendships. Everything they did together. Frigga was waiting at the front of the aisle and would be blessing their marriage, while the Ancient One presided over the actual ceremony. Fawkes had taken up a spot on Yao's shoulder as well, wanting to bring his own influence and blessing on the happy couple. It was 10 minutes before the ceremony when Harry felt something happening, something he had not felt in years. He looked up at Fawkes instantly, remembering the feeling of Fawkes struggling to breach the divide between realities. Harry could feel it was focused on him as well. He turned quickly to Tony. "Don't start without me, I need to quickly go do something." He did not wait for a response as he stepped forward, only for Fawkes to flame to his shoulder and away. They landed on the balcony of Stark Tower where Fawkes had first appeared in this world. Fawkes communicated something to him and Harry nodded, not really understanding what he was doing, other than that Fawkes would be going to the space in between to see what was trying to breach into this reality. Harry would need to provide the power. He did as he once did and summoned a large amount of power to his fingertips. It was much easier now with the power ring, and he channeled the power to Fawkes, who latched onto it and disappeared. Harry could feel the drain, but it was very easy to maintain. He'd received the blessings of Asgard and New Atlantis since the last time he did this, and he felt he could maintain this connection for many hours if he needed to. He only had a couple of minutes though. Harry could still feel his familiar and could tell he was being sustained by the power he was feeding him as Fawkes attempted to move through a barrier of some sort. There was a moment of surprise from the Phoenix and then a question. It sounded like a request for more power, much more power. Harry trusted the familiar and started feeding him double, triple, quadruple the power he had been until now. He felt Fawkes channel the power somewhere, and finally, 5 minutes later, there was the feeling of movement and Harry could tell Fawkes was coming back to him. He was bringing something with him. There was suddenly a flash of gold and silver light as the Phoenix appeared next to Harry. What shocked Harry was not the Phoenix or the strange color of the arrival, but the person on whose shoulder he was now sitting. "Luna," he asked. "Hello, Harry Potter," she said with a dreamy look in her eye. "Am I late for the wedding?"